politically correct movement: equality of women. The media personalized the Gulf War with endless interviews of women doing men's jobs. This hype, I think, helped set the tone for the positive reporting of the war in general. Of course, many male soldiers, sailors, and airmen felt a little left out, and certainly veterans of my generation felt totally disenfranchised and retroactively snubbed and unfairly portrayed. Be that as it may, the net result was a good war, as opposed to a bad war. Regarding the bad war, I served in the United States Army from April 1966 to April 1969. During that time, I took my basic combat training at Fort Gordon, Georgia, my advanced infantry training and leadership school training at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and attended infantry officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. After training troops at Fort Benning, I went to the Jungle Operations Course at Fort Gulick in the Panama Canal Zone, then shipped out to Vietnam and served as an infantry platoon leader with the 1st Air Cavalry Division. My 3 years in the Army were very much a male, macho experience, as you can imagine, and I did not interact with too many female soldiers. In fact, the number of females serving in the military during the Vietnam conflict was fewer than the number who served in World War II. In Vietnam, aside from military nurses, there were virtually no women serving in the war zone, except civilian Red Cross volunteers, known in the sexist jargon of the day as donut dollies. In any case, the American women in Vietnam were in the traditional roles of caregivers, and they were no threat to the men. In 1969, my last year of service back in the States, I began to see female officers assigned to staff jobs that were traditionally male-only postings. This was an experiment that had mixed results. The feminist movement in America was in its early stages, and there was little pressure on the military from any source for gender equality or gender integration. But the military was actually in advance of the social and political movements of the day in regard to gender integration, just as it was years ahead of the nation in racial integration when, in 1949, the armed forces ended racial segregation, albeit by presidential order. The point is, the armed forces has a mixed but mostly positive record in all areas of equality. This is partly a result of the nature of the organization. By that I mean, if you're going to ask a black man to fight and perhaps die, then you can't treat him as a second-class citizen. If you're going to ask a woman to serve in a close combat support group, but not in combat itself, then again you have to extend to her all the rights, privileges, and opportunities that accrue to the man serving beside her. Some men, of course, would say, we don't need women in the military at all. Others might say women in the military are okay, but only in traditionally female jobs. But I believe we're past those attitudes, and only 2 questions remain. Should women serve in direct combat roles? And should women be subject to the draft as men are? Those are difficult questions, and they are not directly addressed in The General's Daughter, though there is a subtext in the book that raises these questions of full equality. When I set out to write this post-Gulf War novel, the first thing I decided was that this novel was not going to be a polemic. It was going to be as fair as possible to the men and women who serve in our military. It was going to be fair to the Army, and fair to the concept of a gender-mixed military. But it was not going to be a politically correct paean where all the sisters are terrific and all the brothers are male chauvinist pigs. At about the time this novel appeared in the fall of 1992, the tailhook scandal was rocking the nation. This was good for the book, but it wasn't good for a sane, impartial dialogue on the complex subject of a gender-integrated military. Most of the news and entertainment media who interviewed me for this book wanted me to make some connection between The General's Daughter, a novel, and the ongoing tailhook scandal, which was turning into a hysterical witch hunt. The incident in question, a party that got out of hand, was all of a sudden offered as proof that the entire military culture was corrupt and